starts by caring for
Apologies.
yourself. It's okay. One other thing that's really important to me is this notion of truth telling. And so really, I think what we've lost in marketing is this idea of truth telling. Like everything in marketing feels fake and inauthentic and, sleazy. And so we need to come back. We need to restore the faith in maybe not marketing, but definitely the faith in humanity, because the problem is if we want to still be in business as sustainable business owners, we still need to do marketing. And so we really need to re-find connection with trust and truth-telling, humane connection, empathy, kindness, and integrity is another big one. So that's kind of the foundation of what humane marketing and selling is all about. And that's also the basis of our conversation. But before, what I always do on my workshops is if you can just change the view to gallery so that we all see each other. Oh, there's Bex, I haven't seen you inside. If we all see each other in the little videos, and we just take a moment and be human together. I think we're so often on these Zoom calls and we forget that these videos that we see of each other, those are other human beings. So let me just pause a few seconds and just see each other and be human. Thank you. It's wonderful to be human with you. Great. Okay, so let's go back to the next slide. So one thing I started to think about, when you do marketing, you think about a lot about your clients and what they want. And so what happened in the last few years is that our clients want different things now, right? Consciousness has risen, and so clients want different things. If you take our group of 15 people here, we want very different things than maybe we wanted 20 years ago, right? So kind of like what I found in that a lot of clients have in common and what they want now is this idea of more purpose and meaning, more human connection, especially now with ChatGPT and AI coming. We are all craving human connection and community and belonging. And yet there's a huge kind of misfit between how we're being marketed to and what we're really wanting. So it really shows that the old way that we used to be marketed to, the pushy kind of marketing, just doesn't resonate with clients today anymore. So it's funny because when you look at how marketing is taught in universities, for example, they still use the same old marketing books from the 1960s. Nothing has changed, right? And yet we're looking at a complete different audience, like customers, or if you want to call them consumers, which I don't like as a term, but they've completely changed. And yet in schools, they still use the same kind of things, and they still teach the same things. So how is humane marketing different? I basically reinvented the 7 Ps of marketing. So again, they have been existing since the 60s. And what I brought in these 7 Ps of marketing, I brought in some more of the inner work. Again, I think for all of us, it's really important to always start with ourselves before we can go out there and make change. And so I try to do the same thing with entrepreneurs who need to go out there and market. Is first they need to, change themselves, or at least do this inner work so that they can go out and be the change they want to see in the world. So the first P's, for example, are passion and personal power. So before you go directly into your ideal client and, who's that, and let me chase after them, well, let's look at yourself first. And for those who know the inner development goals, right, there's the sustainable development goals, and then there's the inner development goals. And that's very much aligned with those inner development goals, because first you need to look at yourself. So it's very important for marketers to do the same thing, so that we can then bring more of us to our marketing. So how is humane marketing different? The intention is very different. So our intention is to, yes, find clients, yes, sell our services, yes, sell our products, but only if they are a great solution for our clients and their problems, right? So it's not the money first, but it's the solution and the service first. So that intention is very different. The second thing that's very different, and it seems like a small detail, but it's huge, it's the language that's different. So if you look at the traditional marketing, it's all very, aggressive, manipulative. They use these, books based on psychology. It's very, very abrasive. If you look at the traditional marketing language, like some examples are the funnel. If you just picture a funnel, a sales funnel, well, you're squeezing people through that sales funnel, squeeze pages. Like I could go on and on about the language. So we need to change the language so that we regain this trust with our clients. And then, like I said earlier, it starts with ourselves before we go and look at, well, who is a good fit for this product or the service. First, we need to look at ourselves. What's our passion? What's our personal power? What's our why, our purpose? And then we bring that, bring more of us into our marketing. So that's kind of like setting the stage for our conversations. And so what I'd like us to do is really I have different questions, and I'd like us to just have an open conversation about these questions. And I think what we usually do in my community is we just use the emoji to raise the hand if we want to speak. We speak with intention, so we're very kind of mindful of not hogging the mic, so that everybody who wants to share can share. And then, of course, everything that's being shared here is also confidential and stays here. So I'll share the questions on the slide. I think that's easiest. And then we go back into showing the videos. So the first question that I thought we could discuss is, how do you currently perceive the role of marketing in today's business landscape? And what challenges do you see in aligning marketing with ethical and sustainable practices? So that's a very broad question, but I think we all have probably an opinion on that and maybe some examples. So I'll copy the question so we can also put it in the chat, and then whoever would like to go first, you can just raise your hand and we'll discuss. Yes, Bex.
Hey. It's just really topical because I'm just currently doing a course with sustainability leadership with the Institute at University of Cambridge. It's all about marketing sustainably for creatives, for marketers, and for media. And it's really pinpointing like our pivotal role, because we sit between the business and we sit between the community. So we're kind of like that real joining and its role in the past has been so disruptive, and taken advantage of, the I guess you call it like the business as usual sort of values of just making money. We want growth and more. Whereas now, I think it needs to completely pivot to be more aligned with well-being, and taking into account nature and its impact on society, and actually bringing people together. So it's during the course, we're just looking at how we can actually reimagine it completely, so that it's much more aligned, it's much more sustainable, how we get people to change their behaviours and attitudes. So I think it's very much that kind of influential state that we need to be doing, and very much like the visioning, of what the new future could look like, to get people on board so that it feels tangible, and that they can actually work towards it. So it's not like these scary fear kind of tactics, but it's actually, oh no, we want this is worth more than stuff, well-being is more important than stuff. So it's looking at that kind of reimagining, I think, is the best way to put it.
I love that. And I love that you're saying that we have this supportive role, right? Because we're often, I think previously it was always like change happened from top down. This kind of change, it needs to happen from bottom up. And I actually still feel sometimes a bit like less than. I'm like, well, I'm just working with entrepreneurs. Who are we? We're not, working with Nestle and all the big companies. But this kind of change comes from bottom up. And so it's actually important to have these kind of roles talk about it, I believe. Thanks so much for sharing. I'd be super interested to talk to you more about this program. It's amazing. Thank you. Anybody else?
I'll jump in. Something I've noticed is when I sort of perceive marketing and maybe looking at a challenge, is like the competition now is so high that there's so many of the same thing but different, kind of, that I think people are marketing in ways like they'll do anything, or they're almost being, I don't want to say like the wrong words, but I think nowadays, because the competition is so high, you're being like kind of attacked as such with so much, especially with social media as well and email marketing, that it comes into it's probably a challenge for the people doing that themselves, but also for us as consumers, because you're bombarded by so much that you actually don't know which one to shop or which one to go for, because they're all like the same, but obviously are different brands, but they come across the same. So I guess it's coming down to sort of being more personal as a business, and then seeing how that can relate to that specific person, if that makes sense. But yeah, I think coming back, like the competition between businesses is so high that I can imagine that's a big challenge.
I know what you mean. And I think if you look at the companies who do it well, then it's usually, you see the examples of the B Corps, for example, who are doing it well because they start with themselves. They go into their mission and find out their purpose. And then they bring that into their marketing, and they know exactly who they're talking to. And then it feels like, oh, this is resonating. And so it also means that they did probably, I'm assuming, their inner work. And they come from this place of abundance and not scarcity. Because if you come from this place of scarcity, then yes, you always feel like, everybody is competition and there's never enough, and I have to keep sharing more and market more and whatnot. So, yeah, but I see what you mean, Elise. Thanks for bringing it up. I think there's Kaylee and then Robert and then Jane.
It's just a super quick one, really, just on the back of what you were saying, Elise. So I used to work in advertising media, and so obviously a big part of its advertising is marketing. And I feel like one of the biggest challenges for marketers and people in that space is getting away from the messaging of you need to have this, in order to be successful. If you don't have this, if you don't have this new product, if you don't have the latest XYZ, you're not achieving your best in life. And actually, I think one of the big challenges that we've got, and Jane, you talk about this a lot, is actually moving away from that. You need more, you need to have more, you need to grow, you need more revenue, you need more sales, all of that more conversation, and actually change the messaging into you need less to be happy. And actually that's a massive shift, I think, from marketing, because our whole economy and society is built on GDP. Your success is connected to money. And in order to have more money, you need to sell more stuff, you need to sell more services, you need more clients. And actually we need to, I think the challenge for marketers is actually, what do we talk about? What is what's the measure of success if it isn't money? And then we need to market on the back of that. So it's that whole degrowth conversation that I think is really the challenge now for marketers, and in building that new world.
Yeah, and so exactly, it starts with the inner work again, right? It's like that's where all the work is. And yet in marketing, we always want to go, into the tactics and like you said, more. Totally. Yeah, Robert.
Yeah, it's very interesting listening to what you've said already, Sarah, and the feedback we've heard already. As my marketing career goes back to the mid-70s, so that's how ancient I am. And on one hand, like you were saying, the old, you were talking about the 60s, they were very, well, I have some rather scathing, I'm a recovering copywriter and demographics analyst, so I say things in copywriterish ways. I call what's happening broadly mining people and planet for profit, whatever the collateral damage. And I also use the term sell shit suicide, because it's really just sell shit. That's all we're here to do, is just to sell stuff.
Yeah,
you could say sell stuff, I suppose, if you weren't feeling so but actually,
depending on the audience.
Yeah, exactly. And like I said, once you're old, you kind of start saying exactly what you're thinking, whether it deliberately or not. But the other thing I want to say about the 70s and training in the 70s in marketing was, I was trained, luckily for me, by the astonishing Juliet Williams, and we were in direct marketing, so we were junk mailers. We were the world's worst villains. I was a pretty bad poacher before I became a gamekeeper in the late 80s. But nonetheless, Juliet would say, "Okay, what's this, Robert?" And I'd say, "It's a pen, Juliet." And she'd say, "Right, how do you sell one?" And I'm like, "You say, please buy my pen." And she said, "No, you say, if there were a perfect writing implement for you, or something that would do a better job than writing, what would that look like?" And then she said, of course people are going to buy the thing because they've just defined and designed what it is they really want. And B, you won't waste enormous amounts of resource trying to persuade a bunch of people to buy stuff they don't really want or need. And that's no good for anybody. Clients, future generations, you name it. So I was lucky enough to get this visionary woman training me in the 70s. Because she didn't want to waste client resources on trying to persuade people to buy stuff they didn't want, let alone do all the other collateral damage that we could otherwise do. So I was kind of lucky with that, because my role being copywriter and demographics analyst, what you were saying at the beginning of today says to me, yeah, there's been a major change. The demographic that is looking to buy or not buy products and services today has a whole different set of preoccupations and desires and aversions from a generation earlier. And we really need to be very, very careful in giving that audience a good listening to rather than a good talking to, because I think if, as you rightly said, there's been a raising of, so I've kind of come through I started Groundswell in '89, which was like similar in a way, but much more clunky to what I'm hearing you talking about now. I was trying to say, okay, I'm going to work on only what seems like socially and ecologically benign stuff. So I could only really work with nonprofits in those days. And then eventually corporates started coming along and saying, we want to do something we're going to call CSR. And I'm like, what's that? Well, it's responsible business. Oh, is that an oxymoron, or can we do something here? So my point is, Juliet was actually, I was lucky to get her training, because she's saying, listen to what the people are asking for. And you may find there has indeed been a demographic shift, an attitudinal shift, a shift in consciousness. You know, she didn't use exactly those terms.
Definitely. Yeah, no, definitely. And I mean, and we're talking about, you know, the people kind of on this call, which is roughly more or less the same generation. We're not even talking about Gen Z, right? We're, again, completely different priorities. So yeah, it's important to remember that. Thanks, Robert. Jane, and then Gwen, and then I suggest we look at another question.
Thank you. Yeah, no, Robert, I've written down not just sell shit suicide, but some absolute nuggets in there. Thank you. So really got some nuggets out of that. I think for me, when we almost, you know, building on what Elise was saying, and Kaylee, it's it's this idea that when we talk about sustainability and ethical ways of doing things, we're seeing so much more. You know, you've got like even the Competition and Markets Authority trying to make it easier for businesses to collaborate in sustainability. And, you know, this idea that the opposite of competition almost is collaboration. And we have to somehow start working out how we can integrate that. So not just moving away from competitions per se, but actually moving into collaboration within marketing. And I think that for me is where there's a huge way to go. You know, you can talk to marketers and they go, yeah, we want to be more sustainable. And then you go, right, so let's collaborate. Sorry, what pardon? And I mean, you even see it, you know, like, I mean, like today I will go away and I'll be like, oh my goodness, you know, you've got to hear what Sarah was saying. And people are like, but how can you? That's what you do. Right. And I'm like, yeah, but what Kaylee was saying, I have enough. You know, I will shout from the rooftops. Heather Davis, she's an amazing sustainable marketer. You know, Avery and Brown, go find them, guys. They're saying amazing things because I have enough. I don't have to compete with them, and we're all better when we collaborate. Exactly. But I don't know how we get that message out of the ethical space. And for me, that feels like the greatest challenge in terms of shifting the marketing needle. Yeah, I actually added partnership as the last 7th P because of just that. I think you're totally right, and it is a challenge. I think the way we can change it is to keep talking about it, and of course walk our talk as well, right? Yeah, thanks, Jane. Gwyn.
SDG 17 rules, right? It's the new business model, collaboration. Yeah. It's the most important SDG. But to pick up on a lot of the ideas that have been talked about, the thing that strikes me in the question you asked there is that what for me differentiates the old marketing from the new is the old one is coercive. It diminishes you. It's fear-based. And as you said, you know, it treats you as a consumer. Whereas, in fact, I don't think any of us on this call would consider ourselves a consumer. I mean, I don't consume things. I'm a citizen, and that's what I've chosen to become. So I don't listen to the adverts. But the ones that do get me are the ones that, as you say, I think the word I'd use is I feel aligned with. And it's not the product, it's the people and the company. So it's a great example of one in Dorset, which I've just been, one of our members has just worked with, is Coffee Notes. They make stationery, but if you have a look at the way they write the whole website, it's not a forced sell. It's just, we're here. This is what we do. This is how we made our stuff. This is why we love what we do. Yeah. It's up to you if you want to buy. Yes. So there's no coercion. It's just an invitation to share their experience. And to me, that's a fundamental difference. It's respect.
Right. Yeah. And it comes from a place of abundance again, right? It's like, whether you buy or not, I'm going to be enough. I'm going to be fine. And yeah, I think that's where we have a lot to learn. Wonderful. I love our conversation. Another question that I thought would be interesting to talk about is the whole measuring. So when I published a Marketing Like We're Human book, that's where I got the most resistance. It's like, yeah, but Sarah, we need conversions, we need clicks and KPIs and, you know, all the kind of linear thinking. It's like, how can we measure that your humane marketing stuff actually works, right? They want, yeah, the old world, the linear thinking world, the left brain thinking world wants numbers, so that they can then show the numbers to whoever they need to report to. So the question I'm curious about is like, how can we measure them? Do we need to measure them? Do we need to measure them? And yeah, what are some different ways maybe, or what are different things that we can measure? Or do we even need to measure them? So curious to hear from you. Kelly.
It's not something that I've got sort of strong thoughts on, but the first place my head went was happiness, whether it's customer happiness or employee happiness or supply happiness, but some kind of like satisfaction level rather than numbers, rather than we've sold X number of products. It's like, okay, you could sell 1,000 products, but if your customers hate it and it you know, it doesn't work or whatever reason, then what's the benefit in that? But if you've sold 10 products or 10 services, or you've got 10 clients that you've really helped and you've really made them feel great, or I don't know, I just feel like happiness is something that we don't talk about enough, and that's just straight away where my head went when you asked that question. So I'd be interested to see what other people in the room think would be a way to measure. Or what to measure.
And I love that, and I can think of so many, you know, services and products where it definitely was just like sell the shit, right? And no matter the results, it's like don't care, right? As long as I sold them, and then I'm done, right? So yeah,
it was something that I had a lot in my old role, because I was in advertising sales, and they'd quite often create features or special magazines or special editions of things, and they'd say, well, you need to go out and you need to sell it to 10 people, and I'd sit there with a manager and say, well, it's not relevant. But I like, there's maybe 2 clients that this would work for and would benefit. No, but you need to sell it to 10. Right, but it's not right for them. And that was it. I was constantly having this battle of, I don't just want to sell it just for the sake of selling it. I want to do the right thing for my clients.
Right.
So it was just it was just a numbers thing.
Yeah, love it. Thanks, Katie. Jill.
Yeah, bearing in mind my background is actually management accountancy, I would still say that measuring, whether you're talking about marketing or any other form actually, can really often be counterproductive. I mean, from the marketing to GDP, you know, what are you measuring? And when we are talking about small businesses and the good things they are doing, sometimes they're almost impossible to measure. That's sort of slightly going off of the marketing thing, but you know, you talk about things. You mentioned B Corp earlier. You talk about the B Corp impact assessment, and that's all based on facts and figures. Actually, sometimes just saying, you know, this year we have done X, Y, Z in the community, or we've done. And yeah, this is all marketing, and it's an area of marketing that is not being utilized enough. But if you're just going to look at it in those pure figures, what do they mean? Are you measuring your figures against someone else's? You know, if you're a really small business and you're talking about you've done, I don't know, X, and they compare that with a big business, that might seem insignificant. But if that's a percentage of what, you know, there isn't a one fixed way of doing it. But I think by just looking at statistics, figures, measuring, you know, talk about it, show it, breathe it, feel it, that's the power more than those arbitrary measurements a lot of the time.
Thanks so much, Jill. I'm so glad you brought that up. I went through not the B Corp assessment, but something similar called the Swiss Triple Impact. And so I, mentioned to them, I'm a solopreneur, is this going to apply to a very small business like mine? And they're like, well, usually we have bigger businesses, but go ahead, you can definitely be part of it. And I got so frustrated with the whole measuring and the SMART goals and the KPIs and the basically you have a new future-oriented label, for lack of a better word, but like they're trying to do something really good, and yet they're using the old way of measuring and saying, and so I completely abandoned the thing. I'm like, well, this is not working for me. That's not what I want to measure. I don't want to measure these numbers. Exactly like Jill said, I want to measure feelings. So yeah, I'm really happy you shared that, Jill.
Yeah, I think it's very, very sad. And so much of that, it's not just the old world, it's the corporate world, isn't it?
It's the corporate world too. Yeah.
And
yeah.
that's the big problem.
Yeah.
Small
Thanks,
businesses aren't corporates. Maybe
you're right. I also see that Monica is putting in the gross happiness with product index. Yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing that. Gwyn.
Yeah, I think the key word there you said was impact, but impact on what? Because I think the traditional view is impact on sales, but actually, Jagdish has just written this wonderful book about Satish Kumar's life. And I was reading it the other day, and there was an answer to this question just jumped out of it. And Satish is saying, there's no such thing as a sustainable company. A company can only do good by having good impact. And by impact, we mean, being of benefit to all its stakeholders. So the impact on the stakeholders, and it comes back to what I think you said and what Kaylee was saying, it's a difference between measuring, which is a headspace, and feeling that you're doing the right thing. Mm. So for this, you'd say, well, is the company being more successful at creating benefit for all its stakeholders, including its customers, including the community, including the planet? And if it is, then the means of getting that benefit, which is partly the product, but also the messaging and the marketing, is doing its job.
Right.
I don't see the point in measuring any more granularity than that. If the marketing is communicating the ethos of the founders and the company and how it works, then it's doing its job. It doesn't need to be counted or measured.
Well, let's talk a bit more about this impact, because Kaylee was bringing up happiness. So what else could it be? Robert.
I don't want to hog the mic, but I had an experience of this, which someone might find useful. I discovered something which I now call numbers and narrative, and it's back to the point Jill was raising just now. There's some things you just can't measure, but the impact on people's mindsets and on people's attitudes and inclinations towards your product or service, which may be beneficial, can be more powerfully impacted by narrative. And the example I sprang to mind listening to what has been said just in the last 2 or 3 comments was we were working on a project on urban poverty, and at one point after 2 years in this, it was amazingly based on kids in schools growing food. But the interesting thing was when the grandmothers, who tended to sort of cluster together during the day but had stopped going out in the evenings because the youth crime was so serious in this urban poverty area in the UK, in a city in the UK, that they didn't feel safe on the streets. And they said 2 years in, the older teenage brothers and sisters of these young kids growing food are now starting farmers markets, and they're feeling like they're somebody. They don't need to anesthetize their shame and their feeling for being poor and economically disadvantaged and bored and angry and so on, and abusing drugs and alcohol and so on. They're now starting farmers markets at the school gates, selling their younger siblings produce. And they've got money in their pockets, and they're entrepreneurs, and they feel good, and they're no longer out, mugging people for funds to fund their crack habits. And so we're back at bingo. And I thought, wow. And we put that story out there, and the response from the people in the city was enormous. The support and the enthusiasm and the gratitude and the happiness wasn't measured, but it was palpable. And actually, we didn't, but I would love to see somebody actually then say, okay, well, what numbers can we do? You know, how many mugging victims are no longer presenting at A&E and not needing to be repaired from, you know, having been injured by people who are you know, mugging them to get their money? How many mental health issues are at least being alleviated, and what's the impact on the public purse of no longer having to deal with the mental health suffering and the cost of dealing with these mental health challenges and so on. So sometimes maybe you can lead on the narrative, engage hearts and minds, and then there will be numbers as well coming off the back of that, which will maybe get the doubters to get on side a bit more. That was our experience on that project anyway.
Wonderful. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that story. I think it's really the stories, right, that need to be told of the different feelings. Yeah. Timo.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to see how whether we will have a bigger and bigger divergence between big corporates using algorithmic thinking more and more and more, and more of us as smaller people growing into doing things without them. But I think the future is some sort of partnership. We do still, all of us do expect some sort of metrics and some sort of measurement, unfortunately. But I've long thought of advertising and marketing as, I think this is a useful way to frame it, or an intriguing one for a thought starter. I see advertising and marketing sitting in the intersection of business and art. And part of art's great impact is that it creates experiences. It makes emotional connections, of course, which is what advertising does all the time to make you want to glom onto a brand and identify with it. But also it creates scenarios that you can step into and inhabit. And I just think in a very hopey, changey way, that's the thing for more and more marketers to help to do, is create experiences for customers and clients alike. And I've always thought advertising has a big implication towards strategy. In an ideal world, every advertising agency will be a strategy agency, because you are a creative, critical friend to the client. Now more than ever, I think leaders are looking for the creatives to tell, you know, not just tell their story, but help them work out what the story is. That's actually a very exciting space to be in. We're interpreters, and wow, we can help in that sense, high level, we can help interpret the future.
I love that. I love that you bring up art. I think it's so true that I talk about that as well. It's like the right, you know, I think I brought it up already, the right brainers. We need more of the right brain again in anything, but especially also in marketing, because yeah, that's where the beauty is, that's where the stories are, that's where the design is, and all of that. And so yeah, I couldn't agree more that we need more of that back into the marketing. And then yeah, I think the technology, the algorithms, all of that is definitely here to stay. But also in this conversation of, should we be afraid of technology and AI? I don't think so, because if we tap more into the right brain, into the creativity and art, then we'll always be different from the technology and the AI and the chat GPTs. So yeah, thanks for bringing that up. Kaylee and then Jane.
I was just thinking about other things I'd love to see us measure, not necessarily just as marketers, but as a society as a whole. And it would be obviously happiness, as I mentioned earlier, but things like health, equality, homelessness levels, like exactly like Robert, where you said mental health, all of these elements of life as a whole, because money is just, it's one part of it. Actually, life, the beauty of life is all of these other elements around it. And I'd love to see those valued as equally and measured, and just saying, okay, we've reduced homelessness by 50% this year. It would be, fantastic to see something like that happen. So yeah, they would be some metrics I'd really love to see us, measuring.
Yeah, love that. Thank you. Jane.
Yeah, no, I love that too. There's a certain apprentice elder, rather wise apprentice elder on this call, who talks a lot about trust. And, you know, I'm just almost, you know, a lot of the kind of the measurement has kind of come from FMCG, where you're working on such tiny margins and you've got to make every last bit count. And I just wonder how much more, you know, we can almost move this in a direction of trust, so that, you know, like Timo was saying, we trust our creatives for their ability to dig deeper. We trust the people that might buy from us to make decisions that are right for them about our product. We trust our marketers just to say, you know, this is how we need to. And I just wonder how much of this, if we just reframe so much of what we're doing around trust, then we begin to trust ourselves to measure the right things, and we just begin to trust rather than go metrics, metrics, metrics. I just wonder how much more content, how much more happy that would make us all.
Yeah. When you say trust, what also comes up for me is empowerment. So I think what has happened over the last decade, or even a bit more, is that marketing has taken the power away from clients, right? It's like we've been brainwashed, even on the political stage. Our power has been taken away. We've been brainwashed. And so what we need to do as marketers is give the power back to the clients. And that's what you just said, Jane. It's like, how do we get them to trust us? Is by giving them the power back. And it's actually not an easy thing, because we've created a bunch of sheep. And I feel like, at least me, I'm including myself in that. It's like, yeah, we, you know, as a society, we just kind of created all these sheep who are just following along rather than thinking for themselves, making their own decisions. And so it's up to us as well to educate, bring the transparency, bring the trust, and bring the power back to the clients. So yeah, thanks for bringing up trust. I think it goes together with empowerment. Wonderful. Any other comments on this? I think it also kind of fits with this question here. I'm going to put it in the chat. You know, authenticity, integrity, all of that. So how can we bring more of these things into our marketing? Have you seen any good examples where you feel like, yeah, I trust this business, or I feel like it's authentic? Jill. Still muted.
I unmuted and clicked it accidentally. Sorry. I think the whole trust thing is something that, again, it's the marketeers need to encourage their clients to be talking about their values, or, you know, we need to be encouraging businesses to talk about their values so more openly. We often find we've got someone who's applied for membership, we look at their website, look at LinkedIn, and it says nothing about them. And then I'll have a conversation and they're doing really wonderful things. And if consumers, other businesses want to buy from values-based businesses, if you don't tell them, how can people make those decisions? So, you know, it's a big thing with marketers. It's not getting businesses to understand that it isn't just having that, you know, marketing one-off platform where they'll do a campaign or they'll do something on social media, or the, you know, something very specific. It's about those core values that they need to identify themselves and then be marketing on a solid basis that's there day in, day out on their websites and, you know, the stuff that they do, so people can see. And then that as long as it's authentic, that's the beginning of building that trust.
Yeah, so true. Thanks, Joe. Bex.
Yeah, and following on from that, I think it's those sort of stories where they're allowing people to come on the journey with them, but also showing the very human side of that. So these kind of the challenges that they're facing, the progress that they're making. So you're not just seeing all the shiny, like, oh, we're amazing, we've done this, we've done this. We're actually seeing the actual struggles, because it just makes it feel so much more human. And I think that then inspires other people to be like, actually, I could try making this change, and and be more sort of change for good, I think. So I think, yeah, it's just like you say, it's telling those sort of stories, and as I say, bringing people along with you on that journey.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think another thing we've kind of grown tired of is these heroes' journey stories, right? It's like, oh yeah, from the rags to riches kind of stories. It's just like so overdone, been there, done that, and we can't really relate to those stories, because if we are still struggling, then we look at these huge gurus and we're like, well, that nice for you, but that's not going to work for me. So I think bringing more of our own stories, that's what's required to kind of get that trust from people, and not fake stories, obviously. Yeah, thanks, Bex. Timo's putting in the chat, local businesses are much easier to build trust with. Yeah, for sure. So how do we do it with the bigger businesses? That's the big question, right? I think, again, sorry. I think it's just, it's part of trust as well. It's part of trusting that this time the change is from bottom up, and that people like us and other people who work for the big corporations are no longer willing to, be in a marketing job where they're just selling for profit, and that they are actually going to require the change. Will it happen tomorrow? Probably not. But I think that's the only way I see it working, is that the pressure actually comes from the bottom, where the employees are like, no, no thanks, I don't want to work for these kind of companies anymore. Timo, you want to chime in, and then Jane?
Yeah, I was only going to say similar thing, actually. Part of the way we build trust is actually with recruitment demands, and it's already happening. The fact that just as companies have to greenwash, that's actually a cuckoo of spring in its way, as we know, and also recruitment. People have to be advertising jobs that have some value and meaning, and it starts with kind of making up stuff that sounds meaningful, but it has to translate into experiences at work that seem like they count for something. So in a way, it's a demographic inevitability that some of these companies will, I mean, a lot of them will disappear or change, but some of them are going to have to change into things that are simply behaving gradually more trustworthily, I think, by retention.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Jane, and then Kaylee.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing, I mean, you said about in the chat about how can businesses communicate values, and actually what I would say to anyone that's interested is go look at Kakadu, go look at what Kaylee's doing, because what you've got there is a business that is saying, these are our values. They might not be the same as your values, and that's okay, but this is where we're at. And Kaylee talks about the businesses that they don't work with, clients that they won't take on. And again, going back to what Lisa was saying, to what Bex was saying about, this, Kaylee will sit and talk about, we weren't sure, and it's this idea of we're not perfect. Hey, we're going through, and yeah, I mean, I personally, having seen, what Kaylee's doing for 2 years, anyone that wants to see how to communicate your values and your commitments to transparency in marketing, go look at what Kaylee's doing, because it is an absolutely phenomenal case study. But that is, connected in a way to what both Timo is saying as well, which is I'm not sure the big businesses can ever achieve this, because everything we've talked about involves connection. And if you're too big, you cannot be connected. You can't be connected to your supply chain. You can't be connected to your customers. You know, we couldn't have conversations like this if it was all about big. So I'm not sure that we can even have a model of big, that big.
Right. Yeah. I think I kind of agree with you. It's like the minute it gets too big, they're silos and they're not talking to each other. So yeah, totally. Kaylee.
I promise I didn't pay Jane to say that. Thank you though, Jane. That was yeah, unexpected and really appreciated. I put my hand up when you were talking, Sarah, just in regards to you know, where is the change going to come from? And I really feel like the younger generations, the Gen Z, they are going to be the driver of this. And I was talking to another marketing company that we know really well yesterday, and me and the business owner were having a conversation around ethical marketing, and you know, I said I think Gen Z are going to be the driver of it, because they are born into a world where the likelihood of them being able to own a house is incredibly small. The idea that they're going to have this really wealthy lifestyle is actually quite unachievable for them. Just even to be able to achieve the basics of even my generation. I'm not that much older than them, but the opportunities that I had, they're not there like they were like they are for that generation. And so I think that generation are now looking at different things that they value. You know, it's not about buying the house and having all of this fancy stuff. It's about enjoying time with their friends, their family, quality time, enjoying their hobbies, their time in nature. You know, I feel like their values are going to be so much more different, especially to, you know, the older generations that built this world. That I think they will be the drivers. And Timo, you said about, you know, employment and recruitment. That's a massive one, because people are leaving companies because they don't align with their values. And I was one of them. I worked for a massive multinational. I worked in an office of 600 people, and I just sat there every day thinking, this is not what my life is about. I'm not just here to make money for a big corporate company that's owned by this billionaire like man living in Germany. This is not what I'm meant to be doing with my day. And I left. And, you know, and I walked away from a very healthy salary and a very secure career path to do this. And I don't regret it. I remember walking into that office one day feeling like I was walking into prison. It just had this feeling wash over me, and I thought, I can't do this. And they lost me as an employee, and there's plenty of people leaving now. So I think it's just changing values that will be a huge driver.
I agree. I think the future is going to be much less the big corporations and much more smaller businesses, collaboration between businesses, and of course entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, all of that. Yeah, so good for you for leaving. Thank you. Gwen, if you don't mind, I'd love to go into breakout rooms for just 10 minutes so that those who are a bit on the quieter side, the introverts among us, that they get the chance to speak as well. So I'd love for us to go just a few minutes. Yeah, go ahead, Elise. Why don't you?
Shall I create maybe 4 rooms, or maybe 3 rooms and have 3 to 4 participants in each one, maybe?
Yeah, I think 3 is a good number.
3 breakout rooms, sure.
Yeah, let me just quickly, before you do that, share the questions so that people know what to discuss. So, you know, we talked a lot about already, but the question would be, what can you as an individual do to incorporate the principles of humane marketing, conscious marketing, whatever you want to call it, and drive positive change? So whether you're an employee or an entrepreneur. So just share some specific things that you could do. And so we have about 3 minutes for each to share. We'll send you a message after the 3 minutes are up so you can change. And the person that's closest with the first name closest to an A will start, so that there's no
Sarah, before
confusion.
you chuck us in the room, are you able to just copy and paste the questions in the
Yep.
chat again? So we've got them. Thank you.
Here it is.
Real.
Thank you.
Okay. I'll pop everyone into the room. Should we aim to talk for about 8 to 10 minutes, and we'll come back at
Yep.
maybe 5:50? Okay, brilliant. I'll do that now. You should have been invited. Drag.